Lami was a young girl of only 14, with large quiet eyes that betrayed a wisdom far beyond her years. Life had not been easy for her. The weight of tradition and the burden of expectations pressed upon her heart every day. Lemi lived with her mother, Mrs. Howard, in a modest home where every day was a struggle to make ends meet. Mrs. Howard was a strong, caring woman who had endured many hardships, yet she clung to hope for a better life for her daughter. For Mrs. Howard, a good marriage was the key to security and respect, a promise that the future might be kinder than the past. When the proposal was made, many in Komi believed that the union between Lami and Aziz would be a blessing. Aziz was a man of 34, known for his hard work and gentle demeanor. With calloused hands from years of working the fields and a steady heart, he represented stability and honor. Neighbors whispered that his reliable nature and honest character would make him the ideal partner for Lami. The elders who arranged the marriage saw the union as a way to strengthen family ties and secure a more promising future for both families. Mrs. Howard wholeheartedly believed in the match. In her eyes, Aziz's steady nature and ability to provide meant that Lami's future would be safeguarded. However, behind the calm exterior that she tried to show everyone, Lami has a deep inner conflict. Though she appeared obedient and quiet, inside she was torn between the pull of tradition and the desperate longing for a chance to choose her own destiny. Her heart was heavy with uncertainty and fear, a fear that life had already been decided for her long before she could speak out. The wedding day arrived with the heat of a bright morning. Komi was transformed into a colorful celebration. Bright fabrics hung from trees. The aroma of spices and roasted meat filled the air, and the excited chatter of villagers created a lively soundtrack for the day. Neighbors, relatives, and friends gathered in the central square to witness what everyone expected to be a joyful beginning. Music and dance blended with prayers for a future filled with prosperity, and every face shone with anticipation. Mrs. Howard dressed Lami in a traditional embroidered gown that had been in the family for generations. Though the fabric showed signs of wear, it carried with it the hopes and memories of past brides. As her mother lovingly arranged her hair and applied subtle touches of makeup, Lami sat in silence, her expression distant. While those around her smiled and shared well wishes, Lami's mind churned with emotions she barely understood, a mix of despair, anger, and the overwhelming desire to break free from the chains of fate. Aziz, waiting at the beautifully decorated hall, was filled with a nervous excitement. To him, the marriage was more than a formality. It was a new beginning, a chance to leave behind old hardships and start fresh. Alongside him were his close friends, Muhammad and Isiaku, who had come to share in the celebration and his hopes for a better tomorrow. They spoke in low, excited tones as they awaited the arrival of the bride, unaware that the day would take a tragic turn. Central to the wedding feast was a large table with traditional dishes and modern treats, a symbol of the blending of cultures and old ways with new ideas. Among the many dishes, a large bowl of spaghetti with beef held a place of honor. It was chosen not only for its rich flavors, but also as a sign of unity, a meal meant to bring everyone together in shared enjoyment. Yet, hidden behind the familiar aroma of herbs and spices was a secret that would soon shatter the day's joy. Before the meal was served, Lemi moved quietly through the hall with a small bowl in her hands. Her steps were measured, her face calm, but her eyes filled with a storm of conflicted emotions. She approached the table where Aziz and his closest friends waited, and with trembling hands, she placed the bowl of spaghetti on the table. In that moment, The simple act of serving food carried a hidden weight. Lami had, for reasons known only to herself, chosen to poison the meal, a decision driven by the overwhelming pressure of a life she felt had been forced upon her. As Aziz, Muhammad, and Isyaku began to eat, the atmosphere was filled with warm laughter and friendly conversation. The first bites of spaghetti were met with approval. The flavors were rich and inviting. However, within minutes, the men noticed something was terribly wrong. A strange, bitter taste crept into their mouths, and suddenly pain gripped their bellies. Aziz winced and clutched his stomach as his friend's expressions turned from delight to horror. The pain was swift and intense, a burning sensation that left them breathless and confused. In an instant, the mood of the celebration shifted. The joyful music faltered as cries of pain replaced laughter. Aziz fell back in his chair, his face turning pale as he struggled to stand. Muhammad, who had been laughing just moments before, collapsed onto the floor, his body racked with spasms. Isyaku tried desperately to help his friend, but soon he too was overcome by the intense burning pain. The scene that had promised happiness now resembled chaos. From a distance, Mrs. Hawa watched the unfolding horror with mounting dread, her eyes filled with tears, as she saw the suffering of those she had hoped would bring honor to her family. Confusion and fear gripped the onlookers, and the celebration soon gave way to frantic calls for help. Villagers rushed to assist, while others ran to summon an ambulance. What had begun as a day of unity and hope was rapidly descending into a nightmare. The injured men were quickly transported to the local hospital. Doctors and nurses worked against time to treat Aziz and Isyaku, administering every remedy at their disposal to counter the effects of the poison. Despite their best efforts, Muhammad's condition worsened, and he was declared dead shortly after arriving. The loss of a life at what was meant to be a joyful gathering sent shockwaves through the community of Komi. News of the tragedy spread rapidly through the village. Whispers and rumors filled every corner of Komi as people struggled to understand how a wedding, a symbol of love and unity, could have turned so horribly wrong. Many questioned how such a deliberate act of poisoning could have taken place at an event so sacred. The community was torn between disbelief and anger, mourning the loss of Muhammad and the ruin of what was once a hopeful day. Within some time, investigators arrived in Komi. The local police began a careful inquiry into the events of the wedding. Forensic experts collected samples from the food, confirming that it had been deliberately laced with a potent toxin. All evidence pointed to a single source: the bowl of spaghetti that Lami had served. Soon the quiet girl, who had once seemed so innocent, became the center of a storm of suspicion. The community was left grappling with questions of guilt and sorrow. During the investigation, Lami was taken into custody. Though she maintained a quiet demeanor, her eyes spoke volumes of the inner torment she had carried for so long. In private interviews, she admitted that her actions were born of a need to escape the future that had been forced upon her. Some in the community whispered that a dark manipulation, perhaps even the influence of a former lover, had driven her to commit the unthinkable. Others believed that the unbearable weight of a childhood filled with fear and confinement had finally pushed her to the breaking point. Now, if you enjoyed this real-life inspired story, please support the channel by liking the video and subscribe for more. Thank you. Aziz, despite the excruciating pain he had suffered, insisted that his relationship with Lami had been based on mutual affection. In the hospital, as he slowly recovered under the care of doctors, he expressed confusion and heartbreak. How could a love that he had believed was true be marred by such a desperate act? His questions echoed the sentiments of many in the community who found it hard to reconcile the gentle, kind man they knew with the bitter outcome of that day. Mrs. Howard's anguish was profound and unyielding. The mother who had once envisioned a bright, secure future for her daughter now faced a devastating reality. Her dreams had been shattered, and the weight of guilt pressed heavily on her heart. In the days that followed, she walked through the streets of Komi, haunted by memories of the wedding and the pain that had resulted from her decisions. Neighbors offered their condolences, but the sorrow in her eyes was deep and unspoken, a silent testament to the tragedy that had turned her life. The trial that followed was a long and sorrowful affair. In a courtroom, the details of that fateful day were laid bare for all to see. Witnesses recalled the wedding, the festive music, and the moments when joy turned to agony. Forensic experts testified about the presence of a little toxin in the food, and every piece of evidence pointed to the small bowl that Lami had served. Throughout the proceedings, Lami remained mostly silent, her eyes downcast, as she listened to the accusations and the grief of those affected. Lami, found guilty of all the charges against her, was sentenced to life imprisonment. As the judge delivered the final verdict, Mr. Hawa was devastated. She cried herself out upon hearing this judgment on her daughter. She thought to herself, is this really happening, or am I dreaming? Was I the cause of what has happened for not allowing my daughter make her own choice on the partner she wants? Mrs. Hawa was lost in her own thoughts. Lemi shed tears upon hearing the judgment and seeing her mother in this state. A strong feeling and look of regret was written all over Lemi for what she has done. She wished she could turn back time and change her actions, but sadly, that is not how the world works. The entire people of Komi were shocked on all what has happened during this period. In the months that followed, Aziz began his slow journey toward recovery, not only of his physical wounds, but also of his shattered trust and hope. Though the memory of that painful day lingered, he found a renewed purpose in advocating for change. He spoke at local gatherings about the need for reform, urging the community to rethink traditions that forced young lives into paths of despair. His words, simple and sincere, resonated with many who had long suffered the feeling of not being able to make their own choices in life. Mrs. Hawa, burdened by regret, yet determined to honor the lessons learned, dedicated herself to helping others in Komi. She organized small community meetings where people could speak openly about their hopes, fears, and dreams. In these humble gatherings, the residents began to question the practices that had once defined them. They discussed the rights of the young and the need to protect those who could not speak for themselves. As time passed, the scars of that day slowly began to fade, but the lessons remained clear. Aziz's advocacy and Ms. Hawa's quiet determination brought about small but significant changes in the community's views on marriage and the rights of young people. While many in Komi still held on to traditions, there was now a growing understanding that these customs must evolve to protect the innocent and allow every individual the freedom to choose their own path. The story of Lami Aziz and the devoted mother, Mrs. Hawa, became woven into the fabric of Komi's history. It was a story of fated choices, deep regrets, and although the painful events of that tragic wedding day would never be forgotten, they eventually gave way to a promise that the past, no matter how sorrowful, could inspire a better tomorrow. And for Lemi, even in the shadow of her irreversible act, her story was a testament to the desperate struggle of a young soul yearning for freedom. Their fates, intertwined on that unforgettable day, changed the course of their community and left behind lessons that would guide generations to come. And so, As the years moved on in Komi, the tragic wedding was remembered not just as a day of sorrow, but also as the beginning of a change in traditions towards a future where every person could choose their own destiny and path.